Donald Trump is currently having the worst week of his political career, and he is taking it out on Truth Social, and it is a mistake to do so, not only because the way that he posts at this point is just so embarrassing. It's always been embarrassing, but now it's really desperate, but also because Donald Trump just posted Epstein evidence that is completely blowing up in his face, and he knows it because he's trying to cover it up. We are going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into the Epstein evidence Trump just posted, which is completely blown up in his face, I want to start with some new reporting Ari Melber has just done on the efforts Epstein took to gain access to powerful people in the Trump administration when he was trying to protect himself, and it starts with this clip right here.
Now, Epstein was cultivating these relationships with people, not just, again, for legal skills, but with their proximity to power, and specifically Trump. Starr's not accused of wrongdoing here. He has died. Alan Dershowitz has denied any wrongdoing, and we played a clip of him discussing that if there was something going on over there, he says he did not know about it. Epstein also wrote during a text exchange that CIA Director Brennan's description of Trump as drunk with power seems apt. And then he adds, any thought on who he might at least listen to seriously? Ken Starr, Kissinger, Hannity. A reply to Epstein said, Hannity, maybe. Now here's another email where you see Epstein wants advice on responding to news that the DOJ would be reviewing the old plea deal. Quote, continue to ignore? Ann Coulter, Hannity, attack op-ed, not my skill set. He's asking, what about the penning something, it's a word there that we don't know who he might mean, something that suggests indignation and lays out some of the facts. And then you have Bannon, who we've been seeing advise him on the media side, says, well, that drives it a week. Epstein bemoaned how Senator Ben Sass, called him a, quote, child rapist. What about Ken talking directly to him? We believe, by inference, that would be this Ken Starr. Bannon says won't help, but yes. Epstein was worried about how MAGA and prominent people were identifying him this way, which would, of course, not help his argument that somehow the DOJ should back down under Trump. He was scrambling for rehab. And when Bannon was advising him, we have a Trump official there, or ex-Trump official, who clearly was trying to help.
When we're talking about the Epstein cover-up, I think it's so important to give much more attention to the cover-up that was happening in Donald Trump's first term. The attempts by Bannon to sanitize Epstein and run this PR campaign for him after leaving the Trump administration while they were talking about how worried that Donald Trump was that they were buddies, that's enough to raise more than a couple of questions. But then the Alan Dershowitz connection, the Alex Acosta connection, all of the connections that Ari Melber has just detailed Epstein's attempts to try to win more influence in the Trump administration, that is incredibly unsettling, especially when you consider all of the other links between Epstein and Trump that Maddow details right here.
What happened to the U.S. attorney who gave Jeffrey Epstein that bizarrely lenient plea deal? Oh, Trump put him in his cabinet in his first term. Well, who then prosecuted Epstein a second time when he was brought up on federal charges? Oh, that was the SDNY line prosecutor who Trump inexplicably fired last week. Who was in charge of the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons when Epstein then killed himself in federal custody? President Donald Trump, who bragged to a reporter about how much Epstein seemed to like women on the younger side, who said Epstein was a lot of fun to be with, who bragged that he was friends with Epstein for 15 years, who flew on his plane at least 7 times, and who now says that everybody needs to stop talking about Jeffrey Epstein right now? Answers there are Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump.
It is very obvious that there were deep connections, deep roots in Donald Trump's first administration with Jeffrey Epstein's dark and criminal past. And we're not even talking about Bill Barr yet. I think that it is important to acknowledge that and not just think of the cover-up of the Epstein files as something that is taking place to keep documents from the late 90s and the early 2000s from coming out under this administration. But what what they don't want us to know about Donald Trump's last administration. I think that is important to keep in mind when we're talking about who needs to testify, who needs to go under oath, what documents need to be turned over. But Donald Trump is doing us all a favor in not only keeping the Epstein files in the media by losing his mind about them all the time, but bringing up their importance and showing the Epstein connections within our government with this post right here, which is clearly backfired. Donald Trump posted, "Holy crap, House Oversight Chair James Comer just exposed Hakeem Jeffries on the House floor for soliciting a meeting and donations from Jeffrey Epstein, even after Epstein was a convicted predator. This Epstein thing going to backfire massively on the Democrats." It is also important to keep in mind that Donald Trump attacked Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier today, and Midas Touch wrote of that post clearly about the Epstein files. Why would Marjorie Taylor Greene calling to release the Epstein files be a betrayal of Donald Trump and the entire Republican Party? Now, I want to put all of those posts in context. First, the Marjorie Taylor Greene one is really just giving away the game. The second post about Jeffries trying to pretend like there's a scandal there, Hakeem Jeffries did not reach out to Jeffrey Epstein. That is completely untrue. And if it was the case, it would need to be investigated. Of course, it's not. But if it was, it would just be showing that, once again, there is too much overlap between government officials and Jeffrey Epstein for us not to investigate it. But all of that overlap is in the Trump administration. The post that Donald Trump made about Hakeem Jeffries is simply just a lie, and Jeffries explained the actual truth behind it right here.
Yeah, he knows that that's a lie as it relates to anything that I've personally asked for. In fact, you had some House Republicans suggesting on the House floor that I had somehow met with Epstein, had dinner with Epstein, raised money from Epstein, none of which is true. This random email that he's referring to was first brought to my attention yesterday. And so what we're seeing from Donald Trump and the Republicans is that they've repeatedly tried to distract after failing with their effort to suppress the Epstein files. This was a victory for the survivors. It's a victory for the American people. It's a victory for transparency. And we're going to stay on the case until these files are released. And once that happens, there's going to be real accountability.
About the email, I just want to clarify for the audience, the email is not from you. It's from someone named Lisa Rossi, and it is addressed to Jeffrey Epstein. And it's the kind of email that goes out literally by the thousands to fundraisers like this, and clearly is introducing you to Jeffrey Epstein as someone they presume he has no idea who you are.
So this was just a generic fundraising blast. It wasn't targeted at Epstein. His name was just on a chain of emails. I guess it was just on an email list that spam goes out to. It wasn't Hakeem Jeffries' team or him directly reaching out to Epstein. It's just kind of absurd. But I find it funny that Donald Trump thinks that like raising the stakes around this will really pit the blame on Democrats. If you're admitting that having a close relationship with Epstein or soliciting Epstein to donate to a political campaign is a bad thing, you're admitting that connections within our government to Jeffrey Epstein are inherently bad, which Donald Trump has in spades. And Jeffrey Epstein continued to donate to Democrats even after he was a convicted sex predator. So maybe we should investigate it? Like, it's Donald Trump saying again and again and again that Epstein is a hoax and look over there and don't pay attention and it doesn't matter. All the while, he says that Bill Clinton and Larry Summers and Reid Hoffman have to be investigated at all costs because there is so much to look into. So what is it, Donald? You're posting evidence, but it's of nothing, but suggesting that we should look into these files more. And I agree. But Donald Trump just wants us to think that we should look into the files as it relates to Democrats. But he doesn't actually want us to look into it, because if he did, he would realize what he's saying about Hakeem Jeffries, of course, is bullshit. So the dance that Donald Trump is doing is trying to weigh whether or not he should be talking more about Epstein and blaming Democrats, when that really just shows how guilty he is with the numerous connections within his administration to Epstein. RFK Jr. literally talked about flying on his plane openly, and not talking about Epstein and hoping it goes away, which it won't, and his silence is actually just as damaging. So whatever Donald Trump does, inherently, he is just going to be screwing himself And it's largely because we're not going to stop talking about Epstein. I can promise you that much. But again, I think it is important to talk not just about what happened in the late 90s, the early 2000s, the 2010s. I think we need to be talking about the cover-up, the first administration, and how Donald Trump is engaging with the players that are still out there to keep them quiet. Because, of course, Donald Trump knows that what is in the Epstein files, obviously tremendously damaging. They wouldn't have gone this far to try to block their release if it was him. But what is as well is what isn't in the Epstein files. People who haven't shared testimony yet, bank records from Epstein's payouts that have been blocked or haven't been subpoenaed, all of those emails that we've recently gotten were from the Epstein estate. They weren't in the files. That's new. That wasn't under the purview of Pam Bondi. And what else isn't is Ghislaine Maxwell, who Donald Trump is trying to keep quiet at all costs, and he's really proving his guilt by doing so, as Jamie Raskin broke down right here.
Well, that's right. All these emails, of course, completely debunk and discredit what Ghislaine Maxwell told Todd Blanche when he went over and engaged in that sweetheart interview with her. Now his defense to this, we didn't have all of the emails from the Epstein estate. First of all, I find that almost impossible to believe. If you look at the index of what was seized by the FBI, it includes 40 computers from Jeffrey Epstein, 26 storage drives, for a total of I think it's more than 300 gigabytes of material. So the idea that his emails weren't in there is ridiculous. And of course, they probably didn't look. If they were in there, they never looked for them, because the very first thing they did when they took over the Department of Justice was they summoned all of the prosecutors' materials that had been assembled over the years, and they declared the case over. They shut it down before they looked at anything. But let's assume that he knew what he was talking about and he was telling the truth, that they were not in there. Obviously, the thing to do now is to say, okay, we're going to have a second round of interviews with the witness here, with Ghislaine Maxwell, now that we have all of these emails that completely debunk and undermine what it was she was saying. But they're not going to make any movement in that direction, of course, because they just want the whole thing to go away. And all of it invites the question, in what capacity has he been acting? Is it as Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer, or is it as the Deputy Attorney General of the United States who's interested in protecting victims and future victims?
Donald Trump continues to give away the game of his cover-up, and we have to be talking about it all of the time. We are certainly going to be on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.